Okay, so today is November 20th, 2021, and this is our Eastern Extinctionati meeting. And I'll leave it to Hugh or Gary. I know Gary had some questions on the post, so whoever wants to start it off, go for it.
Yeah.
Do
Uh,
you want to start, Gary?
yeah. Look, uh, there was two main things, and I'm hoping that we can deal with both of them to some extent. I mean, obviously, Hugh is got some bee in his bonnet now. We're on to the big flip, uh, and there's a couple of things I'd like to say about that. Um, but just before we do that, can I just ask you? That I feel as though sometimes we've gone a bit astray with the meetings, that we've left behind the spiritual dimension, and we've kind of left behind the meeting as a kind of hospice zone. And so, I mean, I'm interested, uh, perhaps not now, because I want to go on to something, another just shorter point, but um, I guess my concern about the suggestion with the flippening is that it's uh, it could be a very interesting exercise for a variety of reasons, but I wonder if that's still leading us away from the sort of core concern of the spiritual dimension and the the desiderata being a kind of a hospice for the end times. So I don't know. I mean, it is going to sort of lead us away or lead us back. What's your
I'm hoping it leads us back. So, yeah, the main obstacle to spiritual development is people don't think they're going to die. They're not in touch with their death, and they think they have infinite time, and they're distracted. Everybody's just kind of dithering around, doing their busy with some useless shit that they think is important, but couldn't be couldn't be less important. And they only do that because they think that they're going to live forever, in effect. And uh, they have this kind of discordance because in the middle of having this conceit that they semi-immortal and death is like a million years away, they also run around with this death anxiety all the time. So they have like Ernest Becker style death terror that motivates everything they do, at the same time as if it ever, death ever comes into the forebrain or the alien cortex considers it, then it dismisses it instantly. So you have this kind
um,
of weird duality where they running around like
yeah.
headless chickens, scared to death, like scared sheep. And whenever you talk to the sheep about death, it's like, oh, death, no, oh, yeah, maybe one day, oh, I'm possibly immortal. And you start getting transhumanist. So they're never really grounded. You can never get them to face their death. And if they, you know, enlightenment is all about facing your death. It's any enlightenment experience is a near death experience, or a complete death experience, depending on which side of the fence you're on. But and like Dostoevsky and stuff had a mock execution, and Sri Ramakrishna, in within a hair's breadth of committing suicide by chopping his own head off by Kali. Um, and everybody gets to that point and goes through a transformation. So you can't get to that point if people won't take their own death seriously, and so that it's they don't even take. You see, the problem with collapse as presented by civilization collapse, as say Rupert Reed would and Jim Bendel and stuff, it's very partial. It just means the death of my Western liberal lifestyle, which is not what we're talking about at all. It's much more serious than that. Um, so yeah, I think the the flipping is what it's really all about, metaphorically and literally.
Yeah,
And so
Hugh, do you mind if
yeah,
what I
go
want to
ahead.
do, I'd love, I want you to expand on all this if you can, But I just wanted to get two observations or two more sort of, if you like, superficial aspects of this out of the way, and we can just return back to where you are now and keep going with that. Just to get these two things out of the way, because there might be something in them. I don't know. I'll just put it to you and see. Um, the first thing is, one of the things that I thought about when you first suggested this was uh, uh, David Icke, because I've had full disclosure is that I've had very little exposure to this fellow. I think I listened to one video of his and read or listened to one interview with him, which was actually the most interesting thing, because when I listened to him, the first thing I thought was that his discussion about these reptilian people, popping out of from under the ground or somewhere, wherever they're coming from, I thought, oh, look, he's just got a metaphor for um, the reptilian brain. It's all because if you
That's what I
read
always
him, that
thought. I thought he was just talking in
yes,
metaphors. Yeah, yeah.
well, but the thing is, in this interview that I was a fair while ago, so I haven't got a reference for it, unfortunately. There was it wasn't it was a serious interview, it wasn't being flippant. And the questioner put that to him bluntly. He said, David, but don't you really mean this reptilian people in a metaphorical sense? And he said, no, I literally mean literal reptilian people. Now, you could come back. I then thought about it. I kept that in my brain for a long time, but it was woken up again when you first started talking about resurrecting the flippening, because and also in combination with the fact that the earlier sort of efforts with Jeff Hull and all the others, and also with Faulty Towers and the rest of it, which none of it really got off the ground. And I was actually thinking that uh, David Icke is probably saying some very important things if you can read in between his lines. And I'm wondering whether the flippening serves the cult of the flippening, which we're about to form, does the same thing, that it will enable us to say some things and hang a lot further out the edge of the boat than we otherwise would, because people will just assume that we're a bunch of nutters. But anyone who wants to read between the lines will get a different message, and we'll have the advantage that because we're considered beyond the pale, nobody will take us very seriously if we say overtly outrageous things, which of course aren't outrageous, but they are to as you were saying a minute ago, people not being able to face up to their death and all this kind of thing, where they don't really they're not really going to accept a very a cup of coffee with 3 spoons of caffeine in it, kind of thing. The strong story is going to be too much for them under normal circumstances. So I'm just making that point about the cult of the flippening being a way to be a bit more outspoken and get away with it. And so there's that. And the second thing was just more mundane, was just thinking about exactly what happens on the surface of the Earth when there is a flippening. And I was just sitting there this afternoon trying to go through this kind of discussion there. I don't know if you want to just say something about that, if you've got any thoughts, and then we can get back to the more serious part of the conversation.
Yeah.
Just like, did you see my little comment there under I made an additional comment under the meeting agenda regarding the acceleration of the Earth's surface, maximum velocity of as the Earth does a half rotation during the flip. Do you want to just have a quick look at that?
Oh, okay. Well, let's get back to that, because that's a technical detail, just talking on, 1,000-foot level. So yeah, it's the flipping is metaphorical, but it's also literal. The you don't want to go around saying to people, yeah, the flipping's just a metaphor for personal transformation or something, because um, it is literally true. If it isn't true and you make a cult out of it, and it turns out to be complete nonsense and it never happens, it's quite harmless from the point of view is that it's useful. It's a useful tool. I mean, all doomsday cults need a doomsday. So that the Christian cult doesn't really work. Christian and Judaism, Islam doesn't really work if you don't have an end times. If it's like a steady state, so part of the scientific or Enlightenment cult, of the Baconian cult, they were very insistent that the universe didn't have a beginning and an end. Einstein was very keen on it. So his cosmological constant led with Hubble's expansion to Lemaitre, was a priest and said, well, that means we had a Big Bang. And scientists absolutely hated the Big Bang because it meant it had a start, which implied it also had an end. And so that ruined their religion. They just said, we just got out of this idea that the world ends and there's any change. And so they since Newton wanted the world to be very static, samey, dead. They are dead. The scientists are literally necromancers. They want a dead world. They want Kali and the Leela, the prima mater. They want her dead. And so they were horrified that quantum uncertainty reared its head and the chaos came bubbling up, and then the universe had a beginning. And it just ruined science for scientists. They never really recovered. But the thing is, this difference between metaphor and literal is to understand what David Icke is saying is, if you get a little deeper into this, everybody has in their little normal Enlightenment liberal world, the world of the scientists, this like decatastrophized, anesthetized, sort of safe world of Michael Shermer, where you're skeptical about everything, you're normie. It's ultimate conservatism. It's saying there's nothing fantastic. Wait a minute. There's nothing fantastic. Everything's neutral. There's nothing harmful. In other words, I'm never going to die is their metaphor. It's written underneath it. And then you can, start icing the cake with a bit of transhumanism and stuff like that. But you see, what they're missing is the world is profoundly different from what they think. And it's more like, think of them as dreamers. Then these are people that think the dream is never going to end and it's just they're swanning along going down the stream. And so if this dream is going to wake up, you have to explain to them that it is a dream. Now, they don't accept that the universe is a dream. But if it is a dream, then all sorts of things that are possible that you don't think is possible in your Michael Shermer kind of skepticism, like reptiloids can come from other dimensions, from out of the earth can flip. So, well, if you have an acid trip, you'll find out that there is what's real and what seems real. So if you have an acid trip, it gets surreal, hyper-real. And the hyper-real stuff is all stuff that shouldn't exist, according to scientism. So they say, oh, no, there's something wrong with you. You're broken. You're hallucinating. You're schizoid. You're psychotic. And so it's illegitimate. So they illegitimize anything that's unusual. And so then they say, well, come on, David Icke, you can't literally mean reptiloids. And he's saying, well, if you go on an acid trip, you will see reptiloids. Now, the funny thing is, those reptiloids are far more real than all the scientists like Einstein and these clever dicks who, you'll meet in your daily life. Daily life is kind of muted, volume turned down, not much going on. But in a hyper-real environment, which is what you'll go through if you make any spiritual progress, you will see shit that you will not be able to reconcile with Michael Shermer. Michael, you'll forever have to live with the fact that Michael Shermer's life depends on him basically quarantining, emasculating any kind of spiritual experience. He has to, just like they tried to with Lemaitre. But the universe will not go in their box. And so now the real kicker is that they are illusionary. The Einsteins, all of these people are people you dreamed of. So the world is, is fantastic. More, and I mean that in terms of a hallucination. It's not explainable by science. Science is just a kind of a dream. It's a fake way of looking at the world, and it's a desperate attempt to kill it off. But so it's quite legitimate to say that yes, the world literally flips. It's science. But you see, just like science was horrified by the Big Bang, but then had to reconcile it and came up with all nonsense like Guth's inflation and all these weird things that didn't fit with the scientific mind. The same applies with the flipping. The world literally does flip. If you go and look at the science, you'll see it reinforces itself stronger and stronger. So really, this is all about telling people about the flipping. That's what I've been trying to be doing. Well, I started this to tell people about the flipping, the literal flipping. Now, it's almost impossible to tell people because of this Michael Shermer kind of decatastrophizing, normalizing bias. So they must, to preserve their worldview, say that you're a nut. So
yeah, but being us turning into nuts, it could be an advantage, though. So I was sort of hinting at
it is because what for them, you see, to be normal is nuts. They're living in an upside down world. So the flippening is from not the world turning upside down, it's the world turning the right way up. Now they live in an upside down world, so everything is back to front. So you're nuts because you say, oh, normal life is, going to end. It's like, well, they know it's going to end. It's just a little bit of analysis knows that this way of life cannot carry on. Industrial society doesn't wind up in, the singular, the rapture of the nerds and Ray Kurzweil's transhumanism and we all become gods and Homo Deus. I mean, that's fucking crazy. I mean, but in upside down world, Yuval Harari he's sane. I mean, obviously the guy's fucking nuts. I mean, really, we become Homo Deus? I mean, how fucking nuts can you be? But David Icke's the nutty one. So you're talking to crazy people. So, but the truth to them is so bizarre that they cannot stomach it. So how do you break the truth? Well, as it happens, it's very difficult to communicate the truth that the Earth is going to flip soon. I mean, literally flip. There's going to be a geographic pole shift. It's not okay. I think we should start off by just talking about what the flippening is, because I don't think everybody knows, and it needs to be laid out scientifically to the scientific mindset of what is coming, and then we'll go into the other aspects of what that means spiritually. But
yeah, I thought it would be worthwhile just to do the mechanics of it and just to establish that. Yeah.
So this stuff is really serious stuff. It sounds like flat Earth stuff, but once I tell you about this, if you haven't heard what's coming, and you haven't read my book, then you'll see that. Well, first of all, I apologize for putting you in the same predicament I am. Is once you know this, you'll be pretty certain it's correct, but you're in this terrible quandary that you can't tell anybody. So the most momentous thing in the world that's about to happen, but you can't tell anybody. As soon as you tell anybody, they have it in their interest to dismiss you as a crank. Their life depends on it in a lot of ways. Their lifestyle depends on it. So people will be. So I wrote a book to say it because I've been trying to do this cult to try and gently ease people into this. But thinking, oh well, basically you'll sugarcoat it and say it's an alternate reality game, and then eventually lead people say, it's not actually a game. This is all true. And that's the way I was thinking, that's the way you reveal it. But let me tell you that this stuff is kind of serious stuff. You can get Assangeated for revealing too much of this stuff. A lot of this stuff is classified. I tell you in my book how I came to hear about it. But it is very serious stuff. So
we've worked that out. Somebody else commented the other day about you
yeah,
being Dean, and
That was me.
was
yeah,
that
not
you? Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm not Dean. Dean is amalgam of a couple of people, but the way I am really Hugh in the book.
Yeah,
The,
I believe you.
yeah, the way I came to this one was that way. So, but just because I've had a strange career, but anyway, once you know all this, all the pieces fall into place in in a rather awful way. And but everybody will say, "Oh, you're just doing this to sell books." It's like, "Oh, yeah, really?" Like, sold about 5 books. It's like it's like, okay, I'll tell you. If I'm just doing this to sell books, I'll say, if there's no flippening, right, by say like 2050, okay, you can have your money back. How's that? You can have a money back guarantee if the world doesn't flip. But and then everybody will say, "Oh, well, you're just saying a doomer thing so that you don't have to, you know, you don't have to stop greenhouse gas emissions and stuff like that." And you say, "Yeah, really, you invented this complete catastrophe and mass human extinction, um, just so you can feel good about having an SUV, really." But anyway, you immediately in the zone of people's psychology and the fact that they everything depends on them rubbishing and debugging. So it will be hard to make headway because people just don't listen. But I made a mistake, by the way. I thought you could be subtle and reveal it all gently. What I've been learning is that the subtlety is gone. In the age of the internet, you can hit people over the head with a sledgehammer, and they don't. It's like there's no subtlety doesn't get you anywhere.
I
And so,
think you made a very important point in that discussion that you had with Sophie, I think it was, about young people today. Uh, you were talking about when you were young and how an ice cream was a special thing, and then, the later generations, there's just nothing that you can say to them or show them. They're just not, nothing special anymore. And possibly that is also a bit of a parallel with what you're trying to explain here. It's people are so over bombarded with hyperbolic scenarios that they just don't make an impression anymore. They all just get shoved into the same basket. You know,
yeah,
so
it's like 300 years of scientism has encouraged in the kids. The educational system encourages people to say, if something is abnormal, unusual, then it's suspect and liable to be untrue because basically the church of scientism has the truth nailed down, and so anything that's radical is probably you can write it off at face value because if it was true we would have told you in school. It's like it's you yeah, so yeah, there's this normalcy bias that will make people and in this age, if you come up with if you try to popularize an idea like the Earth flip, uh, you know nobody wants to analyze something. Nobody wants to look at it. In the 1950s, people would have said, "Well, there are holes in that hypothesis." Now they go, oh, that's been debunked. All you have to do is call it debunked, and then you put something out there in some op-ed, make a very thin analysis, basically saying, I'm part of the mainstream religion. I have good mainstream religion credentials and few rationalisms that mean it's not true, and therefore, oh, it's debunked. Then you get some fact checker that basically says, oh, this has been fact checked because Carolyn Ripple said, basically she couldn't get her science right past junior high school. And then so you
Can
have
we?
an expert.
Yep.
One moment. So you have an expert. You basically then you fact check it out, and then if anybody carries on, then you just exclude them, put them in, deplatform them, and that's the end of it. That's our culture now. So
Yeah.
so you think, well, what I'm realizing talking to like Spencer, and he's all like, no, I want everything to be normalized, and talking to Allison, and she's off on her little trip, and then Faulty is doing something which ludicrous. I mean, ludicrous by his own philosophy standards. It's just an irrational act what he's doing now. So I realize all these people are off in the weeds, and I just say, it's like, you just got to cut the subtlety and just start beating people over the head with it and say, dudes, you're wasting your fucking time. And so all this thing where I've been trying to be hedged, I've been trying to like not put a timeline on it. I'm just going to say, look, you got to do this. Just got to put a timeline on. You got to explain all of this to people and say, you're wasting your fucking time. All of these things need to be put in, we need to get our ducks in a row, get our story straight, and then just go out there and just be prepared to be considered as flat earthers. Because it really doesn't matter. It's just for us and basically our own integrity to tell people about it. If we know this is coming, you need to tell people about it. And I thought it was better not to tell people for a long time, but I think it is survivable. And the very first premise I'd like to push out there is that I think it's survivable, and I personally would like to survive it, and I would like my family to survive it. But I would like anybody to survive it. I'd like the billionaires secretly. I don't want to tell people this, but I would like the billionaires, the psychopaths. All of these guys are. It's better that some of them survive than no one. The Piraha, the Aborigines, anybody. It's better than nobody. So
is this the point?
we need
Is this the point?
we need a diversity of opinions and a diversity of strategies. So you don't want everybody to believe us. You don't want everybody to, if you want everybody to know that the flippening is going to happen. Basically, the catastrophe is around the corner. But because they're leading a shitty life, they lead a suboptimal life now that they wouldn't be leading if they knew that they had terminal cancer, the planetary equivalent of that. So you're duty bound to tell them because they're living a shitty life and stuck in a rut, and you have to say, look, you got to stop that. But in terms of how you survive it, survival strategy, you want as diverse as possible. And if a lot of people will just choose to be normies, and that's okay. If they want to have kids now and a suburban lifestyle and try and emulate the 50s and just kind of groove along, and they'll probably get 20 years of that life. You can have a baby today, and then sure, you're going to die horribly in 20 years or so, but it's like, so what? You had your, think of it like a fairground. What you don't want is everybody to be in this fairground, to know that the fairground has a closing time and it's soon. That's not cool because people are dithering. So I don't think it's wise to let people dither and not use their time in the fairground. But so you have to tell them the fairground is ended. But apart from that, it's up to them. Whatever they do, they might choose to just carry on going, make it the best fairground time they have. Some might go and cower in a corner. Some might go and, smell the roses. But all of those are good because you need a diversity of strategy if your aim is that somebody survives it. It is survivable, we know, because, we've experienced 2 or 3 Earth flips in humanity's existence. So as long as we've been Homo sapiens, we've experienced at least 2, maybe 3 flips. So what's dangerous now is that we've never had the Earth in such a degraded state. So you see, particularly the oceans, are basically, to put a finer point on it, this society needs to be brought down quickly because it's ruining the oceans, and nobody's going to survive if the oceans aren't intact. I can go over the reasons for it, but you'll see if I'll go over exactly in the coming meetings of what'll happen, likely to happen during the flip. But you'll see that you don't the chance of you surviving on land are low. You really you have to be at the coast to survive. I don't believe anybody. You see, they're going to be big tidal waves and tsunamis, volcanoes, earthquakes.
Yeah, I wanted to get you onto this, perhaps not in great detail, because you just said you wanted to devote that to another meeting, but just to give, because I was sitting thinking about it, and I thought, look, people will look at that wingnut video and think, oh, just like that. But you're talking about a very large object here. We're not talking about a little wingnut. We're also talking about something that is not as noticeably unbalanced as the wingnut is. I started to think about, well, what would it look like for a person standing somewhere on the surface of the Earth? How quickly would they perceive these things happening? And so I don't know. Do you want to just give a little potted impression to people about your for a person, the little comment that I made there on the agenda? I just imagined a person standing at the North Pole who might end up at the South Pole, but the Earth could rotate at some other angle, of course. And thinking about things like, well, would tall buildings be broken off by the acceleration, and this kind of thing? Various things like that. It's and of course, then you've got to deal with, of course, large amounts of liquid sloshing around, and sort of then sloshing back again. So I'll just shut up for a minute. Hugh, have you got something you can say about that for a couple of minutes?
Oh shoot, you. Oh, I think we lost him. Said connection lost. But I think I could.
You're muted, Gary. If you're
Sorry,
trying
I'm
to
back. Yeah,
talk.
sorry. Yeah. No, I didn't realize he disappeared.
I think I read in Hugh's book he mentioned or I don't know if I want to mention it, but gravity should be relatively stable, right? So
Yeah,
the question
gravity's
would
going
be,
to.
and the main things
I'll
to worry about would be the tsunamis, the volcanoes, and the earthquakes. So anywhere where there's a fault line,
yeah.
anywhere where there's
Yeah, exactly.
we're west coast of the U.S. We've already got wildfires, we've got fault lines, so that's a very risky area. You mentioned
I
certain
was
Well,
just
but
sorry, go on.
certain
oh,
areas are
well,
like if you're
I was
closer to the
wondering.
poles, it won't affect as much. But yeah, I'd like you to talk about it more. But yeah.
Yeah, I
Um,
mean, oh, go ahead, Gary.
yeah, I was just even before getting to the stage where earthquakes and well, I mean, the tsunamis and that are obviously going to happen fairly well immediately. But I was just thinking of just a very simple model of looking at that wingnut video and transferring that to the Earth, and it looks as though what happens is as it flips, it does a half rotation and then continues its normal rotation. So if you just looked at it as a simple thing and imagined that a person standing at the North Pole would end up being where the South Pole is now. And so they would be having a journey of the length of their journey would be half of the circumference of the Earth. That's a 20,000 kilometer journey. And I think in that video it also said there was conservation of angular velocity. So I'm assuming that means that the speed of the flip is going to occur at the same speed that the Earth already rotates at normally. So it's going to accelerate from zero at the North Pole in this example, and and I guess its average velocity over the trip from the North Pole to the South Pole is going to be about the same as the average velocity that the Earth's already running at, which means, it's going to take 12 hours to accomplish this half rotation. It's going to accelerate for the first 12 hours and then decelerate for the first 6 hours, and then decelerate for the second 6 hours. But just looking at it, it seemed to me that the actual acceleration was not some neck snapping affair, that it was, like actually a person would perceive it as being very mild. And yet, of course, it's more than enough to move, to leave water bodies behind and make them slosh around and all the rest of it. But I guess, I was basically just wondering, just interested to see what Hugh had to say about this, if he's actually thought about. It's an interesting thought exercise, because if you tell people about the flippening, it's a bit of an abstraction unless you can make it a bit more real for them. And I think you have to make it real enough and say, hey, for you standing on the Earth right now, if it started right now, this is what it would feel like for you. Because even saying earthquakes and tsunamis is one thing, but we tend to make abstractions out of those as well, because generally they end up happening to somebody else. Most people don't live through them. So they've got that. They're a little bit abstract from that point of view. But yeah, I don't know. Does anyone want to say something about that?
Maybe we can talk about the movie 2012. I mean, I don't know. I could imagine. I'm just thinking back at that movie. Maybe that's a possibility. Like that reminds me of the flippening, but I don't know. I might be stretching it too far.
You're muted again, Gary.
Sorry, Mark. I haven't seen that movie, but I may have heard about it. What was it about, just quickly?
Just major
Yeah.
catastrophes
Are you back?
hitting the planet Earth. It's a really imaginative movie, but what do you
Yeah,
think,
that
Hugh?
2012
2012.
movie was like neutrinos like messing with some magma in the Earth's core, and that causes the pole flip or something.
Yeah,
It's based on one of those.
yeah,
Can't remember what book it was based, like Hapgood or something. But yeah,
yeah, yeah.
Oh,
Is that a
Um,
good
I'm back.
estimation
I'm
of
back.
the flippening, you'd say,
Hugh,
out of
Can you hear
everything?
yeah,
me?
but yeah, we can hear you. Hugh, what I was hoping you might be able to do, we were just talking about it while you were gone, was trying to make the flippening a little bit more real for people in their minds, so that it was something that they could imagine themselves. Like, I mean, Mike
Yeah,
was just
let me.
saying, tidal waves and earthquakes would be an outcome. But if you look at what I wrote there under the agenda, I was trying to imagine it more from the point of view of a person standing somewhere, what they would feel, whether they would feel much acceleration, whether things would fall over, and just, when I went through it, it seemed to be quite a relatively slow thing, where you wouldn't have, you wouldn't notice large inertia effects. But do you want to talk about that
No,
for a bit and try and bring
no,
it alive?
you're not going to notice any. So it's, funnily enough, if we're going to start popularizing this, it's a good place to start. Is a receptive audience is, funny enough, is Muslims, because it is described quite well in the Quran. The last day is described, and what they describe is that there'll be a very, very long night, and then the sun will rise in the west. So, you know, the sun, in case people don't know, the sun rises in the east and sets in the west. But yeah, this is all common knowledge to Muslims, which is kind of funny for, you know, secular Westerners. Muslims don't. It comes as quite a shock to them know that no, this is standard orthodoxy in Muslims. But so what you will see is, depending on this is what I think, as far as I can tell. But I would encourage people to research it, because I'd like to know more, and because nobody really knows. It's not really documented properly. You know, it's in folk memory, but it's not. A lot of it's supposition. So, especially what it will be like. There's some geographic evidence. There's things like the mammoths. You know, they have daisies in their stomachs, you know, so they're obviously grazing on daisies in the morning, and then they're frozen by the evening. So you know, that's flash freezing mammoth thing. But again, they say, oh no, that was debunked, and the mammoth fell in a lake and it froze. And it's like, oh, come on, get real. So any of these things, people will have weak arguments that will be called debunking, thorough debunked. And then, you know, they'll come up with a flimsy argument and then say, oh no, but it's already been debunked. And it's like horseshit. Your argument is, you know, so you've got to argue all of these points. But anyway, what it would be like, and subject to a lot of argument, which we should have, and a lot of debate about what it will be really like. But depending on whether it's night or day, if it's daylight, you would experience the first thing you experience is that the sun would stay up, or the sun would stay in the sky and start reversing. All of this would happen in about 24 hours. So a very short period of time. But if it's nighttime, you'll have a very long night.
Hang on, can I just intervene?
Yeah.
I just want to clarify something from the wingnut video. It looked to me, I was assuming that what was happening, that the half rotation proceeded at the same velocity as the normal rotational speed, and therefore the half rotation would take as long as half of a normal rotation of the wingnut before it started to flip. So I don't know whether you agree with that. So would that mean that if the Earth did flip, that it would start and end in 12 hours?
I thought it was 24.
No, we're talking about a half rotation.
Oh, it's a half.
The wingnut does a half rotation. Yeah,
absolutely right. But the only thing is, though, that it starts off slowly, so and stops abruptly. If you have a look at the wingnut, I think it shows you pretty much
he showed, yeah, where he showed the flat disk with the two small weights that became perturbed. The acceleration was initially very gentle. It increased to a maximum at a quarter of the rotation. In other words, halfway through the flip. So it was increasing for a quarter of the rotation, or half the flip, and then it went into a deceleration down to zero in the second quarter. But it was always, except for that instantaneous point, it was either accelerating or decelerating. It was not uniform. So I mean, at all points, you will be noticing some inertia effect. I'm just imagining.
I don't think you'll notice any. You won't feel any inertia. So things
Why
are not going to go flying off tables, and you're not going to go flying off into space.
No, I don't mean on a grand scale, but there will be some measurable inertia.
You won't feel it. But it's tidal forces. So what will happen is there'll be very dramatic tides. So you know, we're talking like 300-meter waves, that kind of thing. So okay, so I mean, immediately people are thinking in terms of how to survive it and where you should be. Well, the reason why I'm on a boat is because I think you should be on a boat, and I'll talk you through the logic of it. Is what you'd notice first, say it was daylight, was that the sun would hang in the sky, and it would be Okay, first of all, nobody's going to know what's happening. You're not going to get on your cell phone and hear on the news and stuff. Religious people are immediately going to be saying, "Oh, it's the rapture," and falling on their knees and running around hysterically and stuff in the street. Um, but you would see the sun stay for a long time, like hours. It'd say, it's some stay up and then start reversing across the sky towards the east. So when that happens, the Earth's crust is under tremendous stress, and so there'll be a lot of seismic activity, a lot of earthquakes, and associated with that, undersea sea slides, a lot of mountain avalanches, and so those will also precipitate tsunamis. Now you might think, well, you don't want to be on a boat because, like, if there's tsunamis, you want to be far inland. But I'll go over why that's not a good strategy. Actually, what landlubbers don't know is that in some tsunamis and earthquakes, you really do want to be on a boat, especially as far out at sea as possible. I've had earthquakes in Greece already. Didn't feel them at all. People on the land were like kind of freaked out and was like, didn't feel a damn thing. The thing is, in the Pacific Ring of Fire, volcanoes, you can't tell whether the volcano will go off or not. But what's noticeable about all these the geologic records of these things is that the massive volcanic activity. So the volcanic activity plunges the Earth into nuclear winter, or in this case, volcanic winter. So you don't want to be, say, in the middle of Russia or something like that, because you might survive the volcanoes and the earthquakes, but then your biggest problem is that there's a big freeze afterwards, and you'd have to, if you imagine the worst winters you've ever seen, you would have to then get to the coast, because there'll be extremes of temperature in the mid-continents. So you won't be able to find food and survive. So you need to be on the coast, because the sea has a high thermal inertia. So marine life, you particularly want to protect marine life, especially from the last stages of this industrial society, because the marine life is liable to survive pretty well. It's kind of like a Noah's Ark thing. By the way, this is Noah's Ark and Deucalion and the Epic of Gilgamesh, all the folk memories of a flood that we have are actually, that's a different thing. That is the last flippening. It was probably about 12 or 13,000 years ago, just before Göbekli Tepe. So the flippening precipitates civilization. It kind of causes it, but at least for the Aryans. So it's just at the end of it precipitates the Younger Dryas. So if you imagine, you want to be in a coastal area, but when the actual flippening is happening, that's where all the volcanic activity is. That's where the tsunamis are and things like that. So it makes sense to me to be on a boat, because you can survive tsunamis very well as long as you're far away from the shore. It's just a big swell.
What about the
and the volcanoes? And the thing is, you want to be mobile. You don't know. You see, the last flippening, all the megafauna died off, but all the animals you see today did fine. So reptiles and crocodiles and cold-blooded animals, they survived somewhere. So it's hard to figure out where exactly to be and to survive. But everybody went, especially the humans, went through a fantastic population bottleneck. But they did survive. So it makes that you want to be mobile and not overland. You don't want to start trekking through snow and stuff after that. So it makes sense to me, just like to be like Noah and be in a boat. And
But you've still got this question of what axis the rotation is going to occur around. I mean, the Earth is a much more complex body regarding the distribution of its mass than those simple examples, in those videos. And whilst it's very obvious that we're seriously perturbing the mass distribution, I mean, how practical a project is it to be trying to calculate what the likely axis of rotation is going to be?
Well, you need supercomputers to do it. It's fantastically complicated because to actually predict when it happens is hard enough. But you continually have to tell people, no, it's not the magnetic pole shift, that's something different. Now that's a bit of a simplification because the magnetic pole shift must be associated somehow. There might be a magnetic pole shift during this time, but it's all to do with the fluid dynamics of the mantle, and we don't really know what the Earth's core is like in great detail, or how the fluid dynamics of it, how it flows and stuff. So it's difficult to model, but yeah, one of the things you might have to contend with is ultraviolet light, because of the magnetic poles might weaken, the Van Allen belt might weaken, and so in the middle of all this volcanic activity and this global dimming, the sun might if there's any solar flare or something at the same time, you're in deep shit. But I just want to say that my gut feel personally, my hunch is that you'll get warnings. So you'll start to see, you can model it in a computer, but not very successfully. Although the governments have, the Soviets and the US have. I get the impression the Chinese and the Indians and all the South Asia is going to be not a good place to be, as far as I can see. And I get the impression, judging by Xi and the way the posture, by these guys' body language and their policies, is that they don't know about it. So it's high, all this stuff is highly classified. But anyway, I always thought that you would get some warnings. You would get some warnings from animals. On the actual day, animals are very sensitive to shifts in the earth and stuff. They can predict earthquakes and stuff like that.
What about people with psychic abilities?
You will see some very weird shit, but the people won't know how to interpret it. But one of the things you're going to see, and I want to go over all of these things because the major thing is people won't know what's happened. They'll just know that something fucking weird is going on. But before that, you're liable to see, funnily enough, a lot of flying saucers, a lot of UFOs. Now, this is going to be the craziest time you've ever had. The reason for the UFOs is the Earth is made of silica, and it's piezoelectric. So when you put it under pressure, you get a lot of these electric effects. So you'll get all sorts of funny things like ball lightning and stuff through various areas. But there was this case in Mexico where this volcano went off, and millions of people witnessed this UFO. These basically, what they are, a couple of UFOs information. What they are is they're electrical phenomena. They lenticular clouds, in other words. But it's because the Earth is, we don't give enough credit to how the electromagnetic Earth and space and how important electromagnetism is. It's kind of disregarded. We think it's all about gravity and stuff, and NASA has a lot of trouble with electromagnetism and stuff, but it's not really in the public consciousness. But in these kind of events, you'll see a lot of weird electromagnetic things. So that alone might affect the magnetic poles. It'll certainly affect the weather. So you will see all these weird things. I keep on posting things, just kind of drip feeding people about, you know, the unusual earthquakes, an increase in volcanic and seismic activity. Now, I keep on looking to see if seismic activity is increasing and volcanic activity is increasing, and they keep on saying, no, it's just because they're reporting it. But from what I can see, it is increasing. Although
Yeah,
the USGS on that insists that it's not. It's just the reporting. But if you go and look at the records, it's increasing dramatically. The number of earthquakes and volcanoes.
Yeah, you want to hear something really crazy? So ever since I don't know, I think the algorithm kind of tapped into my wavelength because ever since I read your book, YouTube tells me when a new volcano starts erupting. Yeah, so
There's
that's
a,
great. And then like a new earthquake or whatever. Yeah, it's nuts. Like the other day I got, or no, this is like a couple weeks ago or something. I got the notification that Iceland volcano started erupting. So yeah, it's like YouTube tapped into my wavelength and is giving me the info. So it's like, oh shit.
Yeah, the algorithm looks at the words and it'll pick up the words in this video. So if you watch this video, don't be surprised if you start getting the algorithm starts referring you to
I'll give the algorithm a decent clue in just a moment. But if I could just make a comment that you were talking about warnings, animals sensing it and that kind of thing, and people may be sensing it, but they don't know. But I'm also thinking there's another aspect to people sensing it, which is something that I've experienced sometimes very strongly. Being absolutely consumed with the sensation that there's something terribly wrong, like as though there's literally some kind of disaster quite close by, but absolutely no evidence of it. There's nothing I can find, nothing in the news, nothing I can see or hear. I can't confirm it in any way. It's not hard to imagine that under a circumstance like that, where people are actually sensing perhaps this flip, if it's starting, that they can't attribute it, and therefore they're kind of filling it in with perceived events that might not actually be there. So, I mean, from that point of view, they could be seeing flying saucers or some other phenomena, or really genuinely experiencing something just out of kind of subconsciously filling in the vacuum of clues, because what they've got is this very strong intuition, this very strong feeling, but no way to get a confirmation for it.
Yes, I mean, you're seeing all the UFO reports now and things like that, but there are a number of things happening simultaneously, and I mean, scientists and that are, well, there are different types of scientists. There are government scientists, and there are people that know about this, but it's all classified. So you have to separate them into civilian scientists are clueless. They have their heads up their ass and they know nothing about this. And if you told them, they would go all Michael Shermer because it upsets their normalcy bias, and then they'll start saying, "Oh, debunking," and then when things get worse, it'll be conspiracy theorists, and then it'll be deplatforming, and they're pretty soon this will be a QAnon conspiracy. They have to say all that because they don't want to face the fact that their whole life's work, things like Bill McGibbon and Michael Mann and Hansen and stuff, they want to believe, they have to, for their own psychological well-being, they have to believe that there's human agency, that it's all about climate change, and we must stick to the political agenda, and it's about bright green lies and green tech, and all. It's like that, guys. That's fantasy. It's fucking out of fantasy. So, and this thing, just like faulty, like Extinction Rebellion, that kind of thing. Is like they need to believe that the government can do something. Well, okay. Well, I guess this is a good point to actually tell people what the flippening is. I know Petra didn't know about it and stuff. So, okay. So here's the skinny of what the flippening is. A lot of in history, there's the legend of Atlantis. There's Solon. It's mentioned in Plato and stuff about there's about there's always this persistent flood legend. There's lots of indication that there's a mystery for why the ice ages occurred, and they say it's Milankovitch cycles is the official story, but Milankovitch cycles don't work. They don't fit with the geological record and stuff. So anyway, Charles Hapgood, in the 1950s, he came from the point of view of all these different pieces of evidence, and he didn't much believe in continental drift. The continental drift is for real. It's been measured with, but he was wrong about continental drift. That is correct. He was right about the flip. What Divine Beast posted that thing about Earth crust displacement. His theory was Earth crust displacement because he thought of the crust floating on this big molten mantle. He never thought the whole bloody thing could move. So he contacted Einstein. He sent a letter to Einstein. Einstein really liked the evidence that he had and was really captivated by the whole idea. Einstein wrote the introduction to Hapgood's book about Earth crust displacement in the 1950s, about 1958 or so, something like that. So Einstein was never very good at circular motion, centripetal force and stuff. He had a kind of mental block there. If you listen to Einstein's explanation of, say, tidal forces, then if Einstein's vision of tidal forces was correct, there would be only one tide a day, and the Earth would only bulge on one side. So Einstein didn't understand tidal forces. He didn't understand circular motion in general, and so he looked at Hapgood's theory and stuff. He eventually went a bit cold on it. He cooled off on the idea because he couldn't find a force big enough to actually shift the crust. So the actual, Hapgood thought that, the snow built up on the North and South Pole. It's complicated by the fact that I don't think Hapgood accounted for the rebound effect. Just a heads up. One of the things people will tell you is, no, this theory is bullshit, because the weight of the ice is equalized because it compresses the mantle. So in other words, it just sinks. It's like having a big lump of ice on a spongy bed, on a spongy mattress. And the ice just sinks into the mattress, and then basically the center of inertia doesn't change. Well, that's bullshit, because in this case, the North and South poles don't really matter. The North Pole, because the ice is floating on water. The South Pole, the Antarctic, because it is symmetric with the geographic pole, so it doesn't have a lot of effect. The two asymmetries, the huge asymmetries, are the Greenland ice sheet, which is a tremendous weight, and then the Hindu Kush Himalaya field, what they call the third pole. So it's those two poles that are the important one: the Greenland ice sheet and the Himalayan pole. So if you watch that video from Veritasium, it's very good introduction. It's kind of tragic, because he ends that video saying, he goes through all of the thing, and then he ends the video saying, but Earth is spinning around its
axis of maximum momentum, wasn't it? Maximum inertia,
axis of momentum,
which is the minimum kinetic energy. Yeah.
Yeah. So he's saying, and that is stable, and that's how you end the. Well, it's not stable, because it was stable for all of the Holocene, because the temperatures were they're very stable, I believe, because of human activity. We were holding it in check, and it was in dynamic equilibrium because it was holding our agriculture and our activities in check. And I believe that's why the Holocene was flat. Temperatures were stable and flat. The conventional wisdom is it was just a freak accident that they were flat. It doesn't have an explanation, and there were few humans to influence the climate. Bullshit. We're great at making fires. And we, as fast as we did agriculture as fast as we could, and that held the Earth in check. So what's been happening over the Earth's history is, and what causes ice ages, is basically this: the ice builds up because there's a lot of CO2, the greenhouse effect, and the plants feed off that CO2. It is plant food, and they grow happily. They suck, over millions of years, they suck the CO2 out of the atmosphere, which causes a freezing and causes the ice age. It doesn't just end there, because that causes the ice to build up, and it upsets the Earth. It basically makes Earth into a three-axis body, kind of like your cell phone or a book or a tennis racket. And the tennis racket then makes a dramatic flip. What that causes is masses of volcanic activity. The volcanic activity shoots up in the air, all these sulfates, and you get a volcanic winter after that, until all the sulfates fall down. That takes about, a few years. What takes over then is massive heating, because the volcanoes then let out a whole lot of greenhouse gases that then warm the atmosphere, and then all the plants recover, suck the CO2, and that's the cycle. So that the last one is probably about 70,000 years ago. Then the most recent one about 13 or 12,000 years ago, the Younger Dryas. And so anyway, Hapgood figured this out, but he got stuck on crustal displacement, and he couldn't think. He didn't know about the tennis racket effect. So what's happening now is since the Industrial Revolution was the biggest mistake anybody could ever make, because we were holding the temperatures flat during the Holocene, and then they suddenly take off like a rocket because of the greenhouse gas emission, because of us burning fossil fuels. What that's doing is melting the Himalayas, the third pole, and it's melting the Greenland ice cap. Now, when you hear people talk about melting the Greenland ice cap, scientists say they don't know much about it, and so they say they're thinking in terms of a big ice cube sitting on top of Greenland, and it's melting. So then they say, it's centuries, maybe 1,000 years for Greenland ice to melt. No, you've got it entirely wrong. It's structural decay. So it's more like an avalanche. Think of it more like a rickety old brick house, and the melting, it's not melting of this big block of ice. It's really like, imagine all the mortar in this rickety old brick house. The mortar between the bricks got weathered away, and then basically it falls off in chunks. That's what's happening to Antarctica right now. I mean the Greenland ice sheet right now. So it's structural decay. It's not melting, is the way to see it. It's just, the melting is just lubricating bits that are falling off in big chunks. Now, the thing is, so anyway, it ended with Hapgood not making any headway because it was too unconventional. He didn't like continental drift just at the point when a theory was being started to be accepted. And so a number of reasons, Hapgood was forgotten until mainly because they couldn't find a force that could move the Earth, the huge inertia involved. So that lasted until, in the meantime, there was the limits to growth. In 1972, they came up with the limits to growth, and they modeled the future of Earth as cyberneticists, Forrester, and all of these guys, and all these NGOs. They decided that we were in big trouble because of the population bomb, because of the whole trajectory we were on was pretty well terminal, starting around 2020, funny enough. So they modeled it, and they said, well, if we carry on like this, we're fucked in 2020. Everything goes wrong. So that's how it was left until the 80s. Then the next part of the story comes Vladimir Zanibekov, cosmonaut Vladimir Zanibekov. He was on a mission to Soyuz, a very dramatic story in itself. He was just unpacking a crate that had a wing nut on it, and he flipped the wing nut with his finger, ching, like this, and went spinning, and then like came off the thread and went, floating in space. And he was amazed that it suddenly flipped without any external force, which is completely anti-Michael Shermer, anti-physics. And then he watched it, and it flipped back again the other way, and he was absolutely amazed. And so he started experimenting. He found that you could easily do it with a wing nut. And so he and he broadcast it back to the ground station and told these guys, and they were all a bit fascinated. But of course, instantly they thought of the Earth, and they thought, well, if this happens in stuff in space, could it happen to the Earth? And so what he did was he got a bit of Play-Doh, plasticine, modeling clay, which I don't know why they had it on the sides, but they did. He put the modeling clay around the wing nut to make it a sphere to see if it still did it. And it did it. As soon as he did that, he showed the guys on video, and they instantly classified it. The Soviets classified it because, that was about as bad as it gets. The Americans independently found the same effect, because I think it was, could be wrong, but it was the first communication satellite, Intelsat or whatever it was called. I can't remember what it was, the first one was called, but it had a big antenna on it. And the antenna turned it into a 3-axis body, in effect. And so it flipped. Various spacecraft, I think, have flipped. They classified them. I think John Glenn, his space flipped. I think his one flipped. They've been very careful to have retro rockets and stuff to stop satellites and bodies, spacecraft and that flipping. But it's definitely a danger. They spin. The US has things called spinners that spin very fast to deflect cosmic dust and debris. Basically, if it's spinning with high centrifugal force, it can deflect the thing that's more maintainable. Little classified secret I'm telling you there. But anyway, this is well known in space agencies. If the Chinese don't know about this, they're going to find out as the space, and then the Indians too are going to find out as the space programs progress. So then so from what I can gather, then it starts to get speculative after that. So after the Soviet discovery, they classified it for about 10 years. Then they declassified it. Not really sure why they declassified it, but in essence, from what I've managed to piece together, the way it went down in the US, and when you say something like, "Oh, the US government knows this," well, it's not a homogeneous, monolithic organization. The various factions, the various departments, some of them are secret, but the guys that pull the strings and make the policy, they know this. And then, from what I can tell, they're basing their policy on it. So the mystery, in case you're an activist environmentalist, is why governments, and especially the Five Eyes governments and stuff, are so lax about climate change and stuff, is that it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how much fossil fuel you burn now. They did some research in the 80s and 90s in Greenland, and they came to the conclusion that it's already past the tipping point. So the Arctic is going to melt, the Greenland has passed a tipping point. So whatever we do, if we do geoengineering, if we transition to a green economy, go for it. It's kind of like the thing in Hitchhiker's Guide that DB posted there. You know, it's like Arthur Dent is in the thing. He says, "Oh, the one here, the drinks are in me. The world's about to end." And he says, "Well, shouldn't we put like a paper bag over our head and lie on the floor?" He says, "Yeah, you can if you like. It's not going to help. So yeah, go for it. You can do green thing. You can burn fossil fuels. Do whatever you fucking want. Not going to change the outcome."
Hugh, it might have been Paul Beckwith or one of those other little talks from the Glasgow conference. At any rate, somebody mentioned there, they described Greenland as the last remaining evidence of the last major ice age, or the last surviving part, I mean. And they said that it really, even at the best of times, it was only just hanging on, because it was really formed in a past situation which doesn't exist anymore, and
Yes.
it was really just what was left. And so what's happening now, it very, very easily throws it into a terminal decline, because it was already really sitting right on the edge of that anyway, you know.
Yeah, it's a relic. So what happened in the previous ice flow was the Laurentide ice sheet over North America. It was the displacing mass that changed the axis. So when it went, it had a big lake in the middle, and that lake cascaded out. The Badlands in America, you can go there and you can have a look. It's evident to your eye that there was a massive flood, and that was basically the meltwater from this big lake that was starting to melt on the Laurentide ice sheet. But when the Laurentide ice sheet melted, it flipped the Earth. The Greenland was a little piece left on the side, and so yeah, it's you see, I am very suspicious about these reports. You see, anything I hear about Greenland, and they normally say, they're very careful to say, "Oh, it's all about sea level rise." And say, look, you can forget about sea level rise. This sea level rise is the absolute least of your problems. I think I'm always a bit suspicious that they're putting out deliberate disinformation. So they want people, A, to think that the Greenland's ice sheet will melt over centuries, and the biggest risk is sea level rise, because they don't want you to know what the real risk is. So I get the impression that they want to depopulate the Earth. They want a reset. They want a great reset, and so it's they, from what I can tell, the people that know intend to survive it. So I'm not in touch enough to know details, but my guess is a lot of this is supposition. But all the thing about, I suspect billionaires and 1 or 2 billionaires in this, one of their strategies is to be in space when the flip happens. So I don't think that's a good strategy. I think and I lay out in my book why I don't think it's a good strategy. But yeah, it's good. I mean, do anything. We want to survive this. We want somebody to survive it, even if it's them. So anything is good. Any theory, anything. If people think, yeah, they can survive it in a bunker or up on a mountain, it's all good. The ramifications of actually popularizing this is, in my view, I think what we must do and what next is a manifesto. So do an Extinctionati manifesto, and the reason for it is people have been pointing out to me that that my thinking is not entirely consistent on all of the topics that we cover, and that's true. How it turns out, if you get, we need to make sure that all our thinking is aligned, all our policies are all straight, and we don't have any contradictions in our hypothesis and stuff. But it's the kind of things people are pointing out to me is like, I always rail against people that say, "Oh, you mustn't do stuff to end the industrial civilization. You shouldn't try and monkey wrench it or something like that. People just say, "Oh, you can sit back and watch," and I always rail against that. But the truth is, it is okay to sit back and watch.
There was an aspect to this I was just thinking about the other day. Was thinking about that, monkey wrenching and various things. But you know, really, when you look at it, isn't humanity bringing down the planet by the quickest possible path already, just by doing what it's already doing? Like, just
Yeah.
let it rip, because you could get a lot of independent actors out there trying to hasten the process. But as you pointed out the other day, the system will aggressively try and build itself back and repair those things and recover any damage that they do.
Yeah, that's kind of the problem with 500 lone wolves, is
Mm,
that it's difficult to find 500 people. And you would think in 8 billion people, look, there are a lot of people out on the dark web. There are a lot of people, uh, in cyberspace that are hackers and things like that are working to bring the system down. Um, they might, but you look how slowly they're going. I mean, I keep on posting things that I think that is them, but like you can get a freighter and you can block up the sewers for a while and stuff. A lot of these things that they're doing, they you might bring down the grid and stuff like that, but it's difficult to see how they can actually do it permanently. The single biggest thing, look, you want to be accelerationists. The longer industrial civilization carries on, the less chance any survivors of the flipping will have. They won't have the resources. What we're doing is we're destroying the oceans in particular. And so every day that the flipping is delayed, it means that the survivors have less chance. Look, the current civilization is shitty. The suicide rate is high. Everybody's discontent. It's fucking. We're living in hell, guys. The sooner that it
Agreed.
ends, the better. You want to accelerate it. You want to accelerate it just from the humanitarian point of view. Is if you say, well, oh, why do you want to accelerate the flippening and stuff? Well, say like, if you care about humans, that if you in the 9 months it takes to gestate a baby, 100 million people are added to the planet. So we are heading for 11 million. So we're about 8 billion. I mean billion. So we're at about 8 billion now. You want to add an extra 3 billion that are going to go through this hell, and possibly a large part of how people die. If they don't die in the fires, there'll be a lot of fires after these earthquakes, especially in cities. If you don't die in a fire and an earthquake, if you don't die in a frost, then you're probably going to die. Most people are probably going to die of hunger. It is a horrible way to die. You do not want to add 3 billion people in the death throes of this civilization. You don't want to add 3 billion people so that they can suffer and die from starvation. So
can I just address?
better.
I want to just address the point there, Hugh, from what you're just saying now about contradiction. And I'm not coming at this. I'm not down on you at all in any way for being contradictory at times. But there's contradiction at another level. And that is, for instance, at other times where you've said, well, it doesn't matter whether a child born today has a very short life, because their life is as long as it is, and it's fulfilling, or it's got whatever it's got in its own way. And the question is not how long it was. And there's a bit of a contradiction there in what you're saying, but I'm not making a point of it.
No, I don't think so.
Uh,
No, I don't
there's
think
all,
so. What's bad is if people have babies thinking that they're going to grow old. It's so
yeah,
you see,
but
I
see,
base
we got others. Just
hang on,
before you go,
I
all right,
base it on
all right.
things like people that I know that have a Down syndrome kid. Now that kid's not going to survive past 20, but they love the kid. They know that it's a very short time that they have. They don't have any delusions about the kid's going to grow up and get married and stuff. And they 20 years having it is fine. Anyway, talking about time horizons, then this is something I always avoid. But I'll tell you now, at the risk of being disappointed, of what I think the time horizon is. So the Greenland ice sheet, as I said, it's going to go very, very quickly. It's already going. So the question is, it doesn't all have to go for the Earth to flip. In fact, from what I know, it only needs about 1 to 5% of what it was since the Industrial Revolution. So in other words, we're already there. It could flip at any day. We already have enough ice loss from the Greenland ice sheet for it to flip today. Now, it's very, very hard because there's so many factors involved of when actually the flip happens. You just know at some point in the melt it happens, starting from today. The thing is that as each day goes on, the chances that it is the day, the chances that the flipping in happens increase dramatically. And the reason is this. This gives you an idea of what I secretly have in mind, which I don't tell people, is this kind of timeline. Just before I do this, just let me switch the engine off. Hang on 1 second. I'll be back in 2 seconds.
Wow. He didn't lie when someone said all will be revealed. Wow.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm back. So okay, so this is what I think will happen if you ask observational cryologists, basically people that study the ice, the modeling guys write them off. Modeling is just ways of lying with a computer. It's just, you might as well work it out on a handkerchief. I don't take any of the computer modelers seriously, because I've done it and it's all bullshit. So it's far too complex to model in any great detail. It's just a way of putting your opinion into a computer and making it sound more real than it is. So you got to listen to the observational guys. There are two flavors of them. The military guys, they know shit, and they're not going to tell you. So you don't know where they're coming from. They have agendas, right? So you can't believe government scientists, right? So then that leaves the few civilian scientists, people like Shakova, Igor Samoletov, and those guys. I believe those guys, and Peter Wadhams, guys like that. The reason is they're not insiders, and they're actually reporting what they're seeing, and that's the important thing. So what they say, if you take a little survey of them, they privately they won't say this publicly, but privately they all think the blue ocean event, the Arctic's going to go ice free somewhere after about 2025, somewhere between 2025 and 2030. When the Arctic goes ice free, the first ice free summer, that blue ocean event, things are going to move very fast after that. So you can forget Caroline Ruppel and Cage and the USGS putting out all their disinformation. Is the Clathrate gun is real. It's going to blow. It has a 2-meter cap on it, and there's already, you're seeing these temperature anomalies in the sea there. Caroline Ruppel keeps on going on about this bullshit about all the Clathrates are like 100 meters to 300 meters. There's tons of them, she admits, all around the world. But it's like, no, Carolyn, you fucking climate criminal. The East Ice is about, 2/3 the size of Europe. There's 15 kilometers of Clathrates underneath them, and it has a 2-meter cap on it. It's like a piece of wet paper over stuff that floats. You might imagine a piece of wet paper underwater holding down 15 kilometers worth of styrofoam just ready to float to the surface. It's like, she says, oh, it'll be, the methane would be dissolved in the column of water coming up as like rubbish. It's basically, it's all to do with this it's how dramatic the eruption is. It's all to do with the sphere, you know, the size of the bubble, right? So in other words, it can only diffuse through the outer membrane of a bubble. So if you have a massive eruption, there isn't enough surface area for it to diffuse in the column. And at 60 meters, it's already fucking erupting. The seeps are going nuts in the Arctic already, and they're all getting to the surface. Go and read the fucking papers. So you're lying. And I think they're doing it deliberately because they want to divert people from the Clathrate gun hypothesis. But anyway, the Clathrate gun again is one of those things that could go off at any time, but it's definitely going to go off after the BOE because basically it's so fragile already. And then when that happens, there's going to be a lot of methane. Methane is variously touted at 300 times more potent a greenhouse gas. But when you hear of the BOE, you know we're on the short fuse. Like we're talking, you haven't got many years, you know, 3, 1, something like that. But that it's gonna go, and so the first thing that's going to happen is thing that McPherson carries on saying, or keeps on saying, and that's that, you know, it'll be impossible to grow and store, transport grains at scale, and that's for reals. The whole world survives on grains, rice and wheat, and so that's going to that you're going to have failed crops that year, and then I think people will barely notice that the Greenland ice sheet is decaying fast. It's just crumbling like a so that'll happen quickly, and then the earth flip will happen soon after that. So it gives you an idea of my kind of thinking is like BOE about somewhere between 2025 to 2030. This story is really over fast after, and it might, you know, it might be decades for it's possible that it takes till 2100 for enough of the Greenland ice sheet to melt to cause the flipping. But I think it's a lot less. I think it's much closer to the BOE, kind of like straight away. But you'll know because it'll happen rapidly. Big pieces already sloughing off. Okay, you know, you saw that video with the size of Manhattan coming off there. It's like, dudes, this show's almost over. So that's my thinking on it. In terms of, it makes it kind of funny in terms of things like geoengineering. So geoengineering I think we must write down in a manifesto exactly what our policy is on each one of these things and make sure our thinking is all consistent and we've got it. Because as people have pointed out, my thinking is, and what I've been saying is not entirely consistent. But so we must iron all of those details out. But you see, if you're just upfront about the flipping and say you want to accelerate it, then you say, well, geoengineering is not really quite as much of a risk as I've been saying, because geoengineering it can't stop it can't really even delay it much, because although you don't want to do geoengineering, you really, really don't want to do it, because there's going to be so much volcanic activity that you're going to have like 3% global dimming that you're going to do, that like David Keith wants to do. Well, that's 3%, and then you've got an untold amount of volcanic activity around the Pacific Rim. In terms of places where you don't want to be, you don't want to be on the east coast of America because of all tsunamis and flooding. You don't want to be anywhere near Yellowstone. The Antarctic has about 70 volcanoes, and I have them pitched to blow. 70 volcanoes under the ice. Anywhere around the Pacific Rim, those volcanoes are bad. But anyway, you don't know which volcanoes are going to go off. Personally, I'm in the spot which I think, and you can see in my book, I actually name the exact geocoordinates of the spin. My way of thinking is you want to be at the spin axis because that's where the centrifugal forces will be and tidal forces will be least. So there's one just off New Zealand, and hint, hint. That's why some of these guys are going to New Zealand, guys. So do I expect everybody to like suddenly flood to Greece and buy back? No, because they're not going to believe me, and the guys that do know, they're already here. The other thing is you want different strategies, so you don't want to entirely believe me. But some of the evidence I put in my book is why I think this is a good spot. Is Santorini, as far as I can tell, it didn't. So, so Greece is seismically active and it has volcanoes. But from the last flipping, which I presume is the same flip axis. So I think it was the same flip axis or more, or thereabouts. Santorini didn't blow last time, so my bet is that it won't blow now. You really don't want to be near Santorini if it does blow.
New Zealand's got the same. New Zealand's got the
visited-
same problem though. It's on that edge of the ring of fire. When I looked at the opposite point on the pole from where you were, it was actually closer to the east coast of Australia than it was to New Zealand.
the east coast
So
of Australia is good place to be. Yeah.
can I just bring in something a little bit different? Because we were talking, you've mentioned a couple of times there about how the military probably know, or government, certain people in government would know, but they're all obviously going to keep very quiet about this. You've got the people who really do know, the observational people, but they're either nobody's paying any attention to them. They're just voices in the wilderness.
They're actually defunding them. There's evidence that they're actively trying to shut them down.
Well, yeah, this is the thing that didn't Shakova get taken away from that university in Alaska or wherever she was? And of course, Wadhams hasn't been. He's conveniently disappeared from YouTube and all this kind of thing. I wanted to go back a fair way in what you were talking to. Where we were talking about.
By the
mentioned,
way, I won't name names, but the guys have been Assangeated for this. I'm prepared to talk about it because the landscape has shifted and there's so much shit going on. You seem to be able to get away with it, but one of the reasons why I've been so circumspect is because I could be taken on. See, I think at this stage they trust that so much shit's going down. There's so many conspiracy theories that like no one will believe me. But if
I'm heading in that direction
or something, basically, I can be taken out very easily. I'm exceptionally easy to get rid of.
No, but this goes all the way back to the beginning of the discussion and the David Icke point thing, where that on the surface of it, if you appear to be a nutter who's pushing a fringe, really peculiar sounding idea, that you kind of could get passed over. But I actually want to move on to something a little bit.
That's what I'm trusting. That's what I'm trusting. In this new direction with the Extinctionati is basically we have right? We have nothing.
I've got something. Is to go nuts in another in a slightly different direction as well. We were talking about seismic activity and the reporting of seismic activity, and quite a long time ago, when I first fell down the rabbit hole, I was regularly listening to a YouTube channel. It was called Margot's Healing Corner, MARGO''S, Margot's Healing Corner. She appeared to be a religious nutter who would just have these daily reports on seismic activity, volcanoes and earthquakes all around the place. And she would just sit there for a couple of hours every day going over this in this monotone voice boring you shitless for hours and hours. But she also seemed to be some kind of a healer, perhaps some kind of faith healer, psychic healer. She was obviously into, you know, what people call woo-woo stuff. And you know, I'm thinking of also adding that dimension into what we're doing as a way of sort of confounding people who look. I think anyone. How could I put it to you differently? In that talk with Sophie, where you we're talking about the phthalates affecting human I think testosterone levels or reproduction at any rate. And you made a comment that, look, even if we annulled the effect of these chemicals, uh, the tendency to masculinization was sort of embedded in the universal fabric, and that it would pop up again in some other way. In other words, all that's occurring in the universe is at multiple levels. It's just because a thing is appearing at one level, it doesn't mean that it doesn't also exist simultaneously. From you know, from the finest energetic expressions right down to the densest. Um, and I'm also looking at that in terms of people like, for instance, just the example that came to mind was this woman, this Margot. You know, it is uh, perhaps uh, being in contact with somebody like that, um, who recognizes perhaps that we're at the precipice of something, is not quite sure what's happening, but has got their own particular take on it. And, you know, we bring that into discussion because I think what you're looking at now is you've got to basically be talking to people who are capable of thinking at this multiple different levels, and not looking for a very literal straight story here, who can listen to David Icke and instead of going, oh, what a fucking nutcase, go, hang on, this guy could be saying something, and actually being able to get beneath the surface a little bit. And so it sort of might be the survival strategy for the Extinctionati is to be addressing it, what we're doing at that level. And that would also simultaneously kind of deal with your concerns about consistency and contradiction. Because I've sat very quietly and watched your contradictions and inconsistencies over time. And I find if I sit quietly for long enough, they resolve themselves. And I find that where I thought there wasn't. And where there still is, it's perfectly, don't know how to quite explain it, but it's acceptable. It's not, it doesn't demolish your words
Can
in any
I
way. Yeah,
can
go on. I'll let you
I can try to
go on.
characterize this. So what's going on is pieces of a web are being illuminated non-linearly, and then the whole thing shines at the end. Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah, but
sure. That's a good way. Yeah, go on anyway. Oh,
yeah, but so I think it's worthwhile putting everything down in one piece to just certainly check through my thinking, and make sure that it is all consistent. And I mean, in terms of policies, if we're going to be completely upfront about the flippening and try and popularize the idea, then I think we should be able to point to one document and have our beliefs in all areas laid down. So what our policy is on geoengineering and policy on greenhouse gas emissions and everything.
but is
You
that even
know,
worth doing? Why make ourselves?
Well, it's worth doing because, like you guys were saying at the beginning, the whole plague of cynicism that the alien cortex, or I've called it an evil spirit all my life, that the plague of cynicism prevents people from delving into those deeper layers and looking into it like that. So maybe just spelling it out and hoping maybe that, they do start to overcome that cynical attitude and look deeper.
yeah, I mean, the you see, it'll save time
We lost him again.
You're cutting out, Hugh.
Man, yeah, I see connection lost. Shoot.
But yeah, like I think it'd be worthwhile to make a manifesto spelling it out, because it's like, yeah, it's just either people can't do that right now where they can dig deeper into those layers, or they refuse to because of a cynical attitude. I can't really, characterize exactly what it is, but it's just like how I posted that, how I posted that art piece a while back, with the Ouroboros and stuff. Other people that saw that just said cute, but it seemed on the Extinctionati that people actually understood what that piece was saying. So it's like, probably most people just can't, or either can't do or refuse to, look deeper. I don't know exactly.
Yeah, I mean,
What I was saying, just wait one second. So what I was saying was that as when you get into it, then it's amazingly, all things are kind of quite okay, amazing number of things. So in other words, it's fine to be green and do, landfall panels and wind farms and stuff. It's like, if that floats yourself out. But it's just as, if accelerationist, and I think we should be, you want to accelerate the flipping, and then you say, well, then it's okay to burn greenhouse gases. It's okay. Exxon is suddenly okay. Exxon is fine. It's basically, see, what you really want is what's in essence is happening. You want China and India to burn fossil fuels like there's no tomorrow, with the global dimming and stuff. And then around about 2030, you want them all to go green and to lose the aerosol masking effect. At the moment, you lose the aerosol masking effect and go green, you add 0.6 of a degree, but it'll be about 1 degree they add. So if India does what they've pledged to do and China does, basically they'll ramp up the greenhouse gases. That's great because it'll melt the Greenland ice sheet and accelerate the flipping, and then immediately they'll all go green. That'll add about 1 degree, and then we're pushing ourselves into almost certainty for precipitating an earthquake. And so that's good. So knock yourself out. So green tech is great because you stop global dimming. The things that aren't great, I mean, burning fossil fuels, go for it. Live profitably, fly, go and do what you want. It's all for the good. You're all accelerating the flipping. The system, you see, it's much like having an alcoholic dad or something like that. You just say you've got this dysfunctional family, there's an alcoholic dad, and if you know that where this all ends, you know that he's going to drink himself to death and nothing's going to stop him. Now, if you faulty and stuff, you go and, sit in the driveway and say, Dad, you better stop drinking, or say, like, we're gonna take over the household and we're gonna take over the reins and put Dad down, and that's faulty in them. It's like, no, it's never gonna happen. He's gonna smash your face before you do that. And then if you XR, then you think, then you're like a naggy wife or a daughter, and you're like, you leave all these passive aggressive little notes saying, Dad, we love you, please stop drinking and stuff. And you're so like, no, we've got to be the one adult in the family that goes and says, like, look, let's be realistic. Dad's going to fucking drink himself to death. There's no way we can stop it. So given if that's the reality, it's better that he fucking drinks himself to death soon, because he's wrecking our lives, causing so much misery and damage to everybody. If he's going to die anyway, better he die sooner and start shoving alcohol at him. So here, Dad, get whiskey. See, if you're Michael McGibbon, if you're McGibbon or something like that, you say, like, well, we must get him off the hard stuff and get him on beer or low alcohol stuff and stuff. That's what transition is. It's like saying, like, no, that he's not going to do it. If you go and buy him beer or low alcohol stuff, he'll do that. He'll pour his whiskey in it. He's not going to stop the whiskey. He's going to do that and whatever your low alcohol solution is. So, carbon tax, none of these things work. They're all good. If you want a carbon tax, that's great. The governments will tax. They will, put on a carbon tax. That money will go into the treasury, they'll spend that money on the fossil fuel economy and growth. So it's not good from the point of view of that's wrecking the ecology, but it's good from the point of view is the end is coming sooner. So all of this stuff works. Geoengineering, it's coming too slow. It'll take, yes, David Keith has to go slowly and stuff. So they could never ramp it up. Anyway, even if they did it, it wouldn't stop the thing. Same with marine cloud brightening. It's too late, so those things are not going to stop. Or
Hugh,
change.
but what's the ultimate point then? Is that really the only point in pushing this awareness of the flippening, and it's actually got nothing to do with the trajectory of civilization. Aren't we actually?
It has, because we want people to survive. We want someone to, you see, there's a great risk.
Yes, but I mean, that's going to be fairly well a chance event anyway.
Yes, yes, but there's some really dumb things that we're doing now that you should be against, because you see what they're going to do is they're going to do things like nuclear. So you don't want nuclear power stations. There are 410 nuclear power stations. Those are going to be a serious problem for anybody that makes it through the flipping. So they, if whenever you hear the hydrogen economy, that's the politically correct.
But that's locked in. It's locked in already, though. I mean, it doesn't matter which scenario plays out. Those 400 stations are going to be there. They're not going to be.
Yeah, but they're going to have more. You see, it takes about 12 years to commission one of these things, and they're going to be adding them. You see, so if you think in terms of like a war, the Cold War starting, so like most people are thinking, oh, this is awful. No, it's great. You see, you don't want a nuclear war, because then it makes a nuclear winter. A nuclear winter could dramatically alter the whole situation in a not good way at all. You would be parked in a thing where you have a nuclear winter, and no flipping is not a good place to be. But what's really great is exactly what's happening. If we have proxy wars in the Ukraine and Iran and Taiwan and the Taiwan Strait, the military is a huge fossil fuel machine. You want it to burn as much oil as possible, put up greenhouse gases. So, yeah, Cold War II proxy wars are great as long as they don't go nuclear. It's accelerating the end time. So, but we want to, it's kind of like pulling off a plaster. If it's straight out of Shakespeare. It's out of Macbeth. If it were done when it were done, then it would be best it were done quickly. Well, it is done when it's done. When there's a flipping, it's done, baby. It's like getting an Etch-a-Sketch, tipping it up, shaking it around, and starting a new picture. So it's almost, it's very, very tough times for the survivors to get through. But after that, they're heading for kind of an Eden. So we want to fast forward to that and get over the shitty point. Also, what I'm saying about them flipping the switch on the way out, the alien cortex doesn't make it through the flipping, by the way. So the thing that is very dangerous is that they'll do a table flip and wipe us all out on the exit. That's real dangerous. So you want the flipping to happen soon, because it if things get a bit too dark in terms of collapse will happen anyway, regardless of the flipping. But if it's too bad, there'll be mass suicides, and somebody might hit the red button. So we really want to avoid that kind of outcome. And the longer
this is the point
drags on, the more those scenarios come up.
Yeah, because
it's just saying that the flipping is the big solution that everybody's looking for. Wouldn't it be funny if we did some AI? We ran a big AI, all these transhumans, they'll tell us what the solution is. And, well, I'll tell you, AI has already told us what the solution is. If you have a look at these AI things that can do the Dunning-Kruger effect, which they're running, by the way, they're telling us, they're saying, you don't have a problem. Basically, this problem is solved by the flipping, and there on out, it's Eden for anybody that survived. So knock yourself out.
We haven't got time to do it now, but maybe in the next meeting can we visit the extension of this, which is what you just touched on, which is for the small number of people left, this may be some kind of an Eden for them. But most people,
Depending on what's left, what's
yeah.
left. So
Well,
we're causing
depending, yeah,
tremendous destruction to that Eden. I mean,
that's right. So
they're going to be
I
domestic cows wandering around feral and chickens wandering around feral,
yeah,
but those are not going to last, right? You need real wild animals for them to. You see, what got us through the previous one is there were a lot of the intact ecosystems with wild animals. So
yeah,
to get through this, it's not heat you have to get through; it's cold. It's a short snap of very very cold weather. By the way, if all this if you haven't heard or any of this before, and it all comes as a bit of a shock, I've got worse for you. Is that it's very unlikely that there's only one flip. So this isn't bad enough. There's probably one or two flips, maybe a series in before the Earth stabilizes again. So you don't have to just get through one flip. In very short order, maybe in a few years or maybe 100 or so, you know, on some geological thing, you probably have to undergo one or two more. So they probably come in a little flutter and they dance. Sorry to
the
tell you, but it's survivable. Just remember that humans survived it.
I have a question. So wasn't there like some Paleolithic or Neolithic humans like living in North America during the last flippening? Like, because the Native Americans' ancestors and stuff, wasn't there people that crossed that land bridge into the U.S. maybe on like the West Coast or something?
Yeah, you see, the timeline gets funny because the first people there are the Solutreans. And the Solutreans probably came from France, though it's very politically correct to say that because you're supposed to say First Nation and stuff. Well, sorry, guys. Sorry for political correctness, but almost definitely uh, Native Americans are not the First Nation. The First Nation are the Solutreans, and they almost definitely come from France, which terribly sorry, but white people are first. That's the
That's
unfair
hilarious.
thing you can actually say. But I'm sorry, all the evidence is staring the guys in the face, and they're having a big argument about Solutrean first. And what's hidden is that's racist. Sorry,
Yeah,
dudes, but
I wasn't
the
sure
white version
exactly.
doesn't work.
Yeah, I wasn't settled on who was first exactly. I'm just wondering, like, if people got here and whoever they were, like, were they because it was like 20,000 years or something. So like, there had to have been people in this landmass that survived the flippening.
Yeah, but here this is an important point. Is I think we must talk again about what kind of skills you need, and I think the people that survive are kind of ice guys, so they're kind of icemen. So I think that the Neanderthals survived previous flipnings because they are kind of icemen. But kind of like you have to be kind of like an Inuit, and you because see if you look at these pastoralists like Vikings that went to Greenland and Iceland and didn't make out, they all died horribly. Um, they could have survived if they just adopted the native ways, but because they stuck to pastoralism and stuff, they couldn't adapt. They didn't think like an Inuit, and so they see, now most people are that way, permaculturists, all of that. They're thinking like a Viking pastoralist. They're not going to survive. You have to think more in terms of hunting animals and that
You
kind of
got to know
thing.
how to butcher a kill, yeah. I mean, I've done a little bit of that with roadkill deers because I had to feed those wolves I was working with. So I did a little bit of that. That's a really spiritual experience there.
Yeah, but you
Yeah.
you you have to. You see, I don't think you have much hope of living off plants. Herbivores can do it much better than us, but we're better off hunting
We're
herbivores.
Yeah, we're predators. You need the iron and potassium and stuff in the meat. Yeah, the meat is super nutritious. Like I've never agreed with the vegetarians. Like, dude, your brain is 60% fat. You're a predator. You get that big brain from eating meat. So, don't feed me this
You need the
bullshit.
choline. So we'll chalk up. That's another thing to put in the manifesto. Is what's our take on vegetarianism?
Yeah,
And I
yeah.
think
I
we
read
all
this.
agree on this. But I mean, I think that's the thing is you're not going to survive the flipping as a vegetarian. If you want to be a vegetarian for the next few decades before the flipping, go for it. Knock yourself out. Be as stir as you like. Eat whatever you like. You can eat cows. It doesn't matter a damn. Just make sure
Yeah,
that they're not the wild animals. But
yeah.
you know,
It's
if you
like
think you're going to do permaculture and survive the flipping, think again.
Yeah, it's like, a lot of my favorite stories center on predatory animals, and like one of them, the fox, and his favorite thing is chopping coney. That's what he calls it when he hunts rabbits. He calls it chopping coney.
No, trapping rabbits and little furry, warm-blooded animals, that's what you need to do, man.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, rabbits. Make sure that you're in a place with a lot of rabbits.
yep, chop the coney.
Well,
Yeah.
so, okay, well, let's end it off there, and then we'll try and take it up again in the Western meeting tonight.
Hugh,
But
is it
something to be
possible?
repetitive, I guess.
No, no. To avoid it being repetitious, can you go more into the other side of what we're doing? Well, I don't know. I don't know if that's what you want to do, but I mean, some people are going to survive this and still be on the planet somewhere. But for most of the people on the planet, they're going to die. And most of those people are going to die pretty unfortunate deaths. And I think be reasonable to say that most of those people are going to know that they haven't got any particular escape or much that they can do about it. And this is a point I wanted to zero in on fairly closely, because I'm sure there's more than one other person on just in the Extinctionati who realizes that they haven't got much option when things start to go down. That they're more or less going to be where they are now, and they're probably going to starve to death. And you've already mentioned about that being an extremely unfortunate way to go, and this kind of thing. So what I'd like to do is, if you can, talk about that kind of thing and the role of the Extinctionati as a bit of a hospice, and the discussion of the flippening as being a way to focus people's minds more closely on their death. And just to touch on what you said about consistency and contradiction, because for instance, you make the point about sorry, I didn't realize I had the camera off. You made the point about rule number 8 is the rule that gets referred to more almost exclusively and none of the others. And I think can you possibly go into a contradiction there, or an apparent contradiction, which is for a person who is starving to death, uh, you know it might be better if they took a bit of a shortcut.
Yeah, so
And
there's a contradiction in the Desiderata. It's kind of necessary. So you don't want to do any self-harm. The major reason is because your alien cortex will, rather than,
take that. Yeah,
yeah, it'll take the easy way out, which is
yeah,
killing
that's
you
right.
off rather than actually achieving liberation. But
Yeah,
but you see, in terms of other desiderata, like not being too dogmatic, that runs
yeah.
also in the basis that you shouldn't obey any rules. So
Mm,
one of the desiderata is not to obey any rules. So
mm,
that is a definite
mm,
rule and injunction. So that it contradicts
mm.
it. So you don't want to be too absolutist about these things. And no
Yeah,
one wants to die of starvation. In fact, no one really dies of starvation. What you die of is you die of disease, because your body is fending off diseases all the time. All the diseases are inside you. Everybody thinks disease is outside and pandemics come from, nah.
and
You
it's already
if you
there.
you look inside what's inside your gut bacteria and your mouth bacteria. There's like the worst pandemics you've ever seen. They're right inside us all the time. The reason is they don't wipe us out is we're healthy and we're defending ourselves all the time from them. Well, not defending ourselves. It's just that we have a self-reinforcing feedback loop, and that's what we are. That's what life is. And so that loop stays closed, so they don't get in. What happens when you get malnourished is that self-reinforcing feedback loop breaks. As soon as it breaks, all the other competing self-reinforcing feedback loops, which is the essentially parasites and disease, they will take over and then kind of clean up, vacuum up what's left of you. So people die of disease, and so you think, well, there's no, when you know that there's no hope, right? And you know that this you're breaking up worse than the jet stream. Yeah, it's like there's no point in suffering needlessly through it all. So you don't want,
I just I don't mean for you to go into that now, but I mean perhaps at the following meeting you can deal with this other side of the whole discussion. This more personal, bring it down to the personal level.
But in general, you want to be you want to be anti unaliving yourself. You can't really say that word on YouTube, but you want to be anti that because people are going to do it in droves. They're already doing it in droves. So there's going to be a lot of self-destructive behavior indirectly through abuse, alcohol abuse, drug abuse, all sorts of physical mutilations and fetishes and stuff like that. It's going to be pandemic. It already is. And so that goes against the grain of making sure that at least some of us survive. You see, to get through to enlightenment, you have to go hit rock bottom in terms of depression. Now, you can't make it through to the other side if you give in to the depression. So you want to be really, really anti people taking that route out. But I mean, when it's all said and done, when you're really on the way out, you get an absolution. The second prize in the race is that you get deathbed's last rites is you get forgiven everything.
I think this is probably what you're encountering is probably, I think, what a lot of gurus, for want of a better word, encounter is the level at which to pitch their talk, because of the possibility of people mistaking what they're saying. And I don't know whether, maybe it could be time for you to just pitch yourself at a certain level. And if a certain segment of people mistake it, well, just too fucking bad for them kind of thing, rather than sort of trying to address too many levels of understanding at the same time. Because
the consequences for us taking that route. You see, if you give all the opposition that kind of leeway, that you are being callous or encouraging people to take that route, the reaction could be vicious. You see, it's a great diversion from our main task. Is if they can accuse us of that, that's kind of the end of us. There's massive repercussions from that. So you can't be callous about that. You have to be super careful about not being too cavalier on that score. Yeah, you see, in general, that's the deflection problem. There's another one, and that's that you don't want people talk and do things out of false knowledge. So on the path to enlightenment, they will hear something which is they don't really understand, but it is what they're saying is true, but they are saying, so it's what's it called in epistemology? It's an a fact that is actually in point of fact true, but the reasons they think it is true is wrong. So in other words, those are very dangerous, because the people pick up on a truth. See, one of them is, oh, you can just sit back and watch the world end. It's like, well, yeah. And the other one, but you don't want, that is the truth, but you don't want to know that because you don't know what you're saying. And the other one is, well, everything's okay in the end. And it's like, yes, that is the truth. But since you still think in terms of dualism and black and white and stuff, then in your language, that's a falsehood. And
Yeah, but just see, you're perfectly right. But the point is,
right, but it's what you're saying for the wrong reasons and with the wrong understanding. So you should be corrected because you live in the world of correction.
Okay, but I mean, when it comes down to that, unfortunately, it only leaves people like yourself as really being uh, deserving of being allowed to open your mouth, because the level from which you're operating is understands that.
No, I don't have a license at the moment. Everybody that's talking
No,
is
I don't mean so license, but the point is you do.
Everybody that once you open your mouth and speak, you're speaking from the alien cortex. It's a lie. So I'm lying to you now. Whenever I'm speaking,
Yes.
I'm lying to you. There's no other option. If you use
No,
words,
that's right. But the option is less wrong from a person who at least has got over their alien cortex. I mean, you don't have any choice but to use words. You're already
yes,
compromised the minute you make a sound.
Yes, but a lot of guys like that silent guru and a lot of guys have just used a silent transmission for that very reason. Is that but no one understands that now. So as the world descends into more and more ignorance, then you have to meet people for where they are. So if you do the silent guru thing, everybody says, "Oh, look at this! It's such a joke. It's just a gimmick and stuff." And it's like, subtlety is lost in this day and age. So you have to start talking and engaging people at their level. As soon as you do that, then they'll accuse you of inconsistency, hypocrisy, and stuff. So yeah, that comes with language. It's impossible by Gödel's theorem, to even be completely consistent, completely wholly true. All the stuff we're supposed to be.
All that stuff. You can't do it at once. But I mean, is it better looking at it this way, perhaps, that I don't think this little thing called the extinctionati is ever going to become, a very big phenomena. And so.
I think it could become about as big as like the flat Earth thing. You see, I think our goal should be to try and make it a meme that everybody knows about but dismisses. I think is kind of a good goal, kind of like the flat Earthers. So everybody knows it. They kind of entertain it. It's a thing out there, and it's at the back of people's minds because.
Well, that's a bit like David Icke as well, I suppose.
A bit like David Icke. You see.
Yeah.
My thing is this. I maybe it's just personal, but I have this vision of people when all the stuff goes down, then people are going to be terribly confused. In other words, if they go, oh my God, those extinctionati nuts were right, and it's like, yeah, so that's a good enough gift to give them, right?
Yeah, no, okay.
They don't have to believe it,
that's
accept it, or anything. But they need to know about it, so that when it happens, they need to know what they're looking at.
Yeah, but I guess this is what I meant right at the beginning, was that the way to stay out of trouble with it is to present it like that deliberately, so that you don't get into overt conflict with the forces of the status quo. But there's still a message there. Like, David Icke is dismissed as a complete whack job. But for instance, I felt I didn't have any trouble seeing something there in what was going on. I thought, okay, something's going on. This guy's actually quite interesting, but I don't have to take him literally. I just sort of use him as an extra can opener to broaden my understanding, and you can that could be the way we operate.
Well, let's go over the manifesto first. Make sure we all agree politically on, and then decide what to do. But I think it's yeah. I think you could. I mean, it's a. I think we have to go full on against the mindless opposition. I find it terribly difficult. It wears me down. I think it wears anybody down going up against the wall of idiocy. But I think we have to do it as a vehicle to so that people can hear about the flippening. So yeah, I think we have to go headlong
Yeah, but
into it.
again, you don't.
Probably
Yeah,
will
but
wear
you're
us down.
going. Don't meet it head on its own. You know, a rational argument. It's not going to. Doesn't matter. It's not going to work. Um, so it might be better just displaying something quite. It makes the point, but doesn't take them on at the level.
I always come back to the art because the way you see, I was thinking in the Western meeting we must talk about the cartoons and stuff, but that's where I was taking the cartoons. If you start off like that, I think we can get them into being. They start off light and frivolous and kind of idiotic, but they get more and more interesting. I think you can take the Elam Stark character, because he's a cult leader. So you can actually use it as a vehicle for a lot of deeper things. So it kind of suckers people in with a bit of candy, and then it's always kind of sugar coated, and you can get deeper and deeper as you get into it. So I think we can do stuff like that. Yeah, but first let's make sure we have all our ducks in a row, and then I think some people might bail. Some things I think people might be a bit too much for them. The already our small group might split on trying to agree on certain issues.
I got to admit that right back at the beginning, when you started to formulate the rules, the whole idea just left me cold. I just, I just didn't see a you know, it, all of these things depend on the level at which you look at it, and then when you go into individual rules or statements when they're made, there's multiple different ways of interpreting them and taking them. And so it's very difficult to say that you depart from them, or that you don't agree, or that you've got some argument because it's some other level that doesn't exist. As soon as you start doing something like that, um, I think for the people who would leave on account of perhaps a manifesto that you might do, I think they'd need to ask themselves whether they've got a sufficiently varied way of looking at things.
Well, I think anybody that comes up with a strong point of view will encounter it again on different levels, and it'll kind of recur. So we ought to address it, make sure we get our position straight on it. Because if anybody comes up with a challenge, it's not going to be unique. We're going to be a challenge later on a wider scale if we move forward and popularize it. So it's better to address it now. But okay, well, I'm going to suggest that we better round it off at that point and then pick it up again at the next meeting.
Okay.
Because it's getting late for Mike and stuff. Sorry, Mike.
Yeah, sorry.
It's
Yeah.
all right. This is fascinating stuff. So no problem.
Yeah. Well, it will get more fascinating, I'm pretty sure. But all right, let's just pause and then start. And then yeah, we must go over the sigil and stuff. I got a few ideas for what to do with the sigil and stuff. So let's go over that in a few hours. All right then. Just for still. Om Paramatmani Namah. Okay. All right then.
All right.
All right.
Okay,
Sorry.
thanks, Hugh. Thank you.
And yeah,
Thanks,
I hope
everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
I hope
Yeah.
the sun doesn't rise in the west tomorrow. Well, I hope it does. See you later. Maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Okay. Yeah.
All right, I'll stop recording.
Be safe.